Hello everyone and welcome to our webinar for this week. How do we build trust in teams? I'm Sharon Jones, that's me with a lovely flying hair, as picture there, and with me today is Dragon, who's our technical services chap and slide forwarder. So let's get going into our agenda. Today we're going to look at 4 key areas. You and your team trust. Where are you? We're also going to look at a definition of trust, why trust is key in teams, and lastly, look at behaviours to build trust and application of DISC to trust building situations, including restoring trust and credibility, having tough conversations, and delegation when you don't trust another person's competence. Downloads that were available for today and you should have received ahead of the webinar. And some of these were asked to do some thinking about before you came onto it today, so I hope you've managed to do that. If you didn't receive these documents, you can download them in your console window, which is your communications device where you're going to communicate with me in text. You'll find a section that says handouts, and it says 3 of 5 handouts. I think there are. So what did it say? 3, 5. Anyway, there's 3 handouts. All is good. So if you don't have them, you can download them there. You were also sent the case study, which is about the Bees and Honey Advertising Agency, along with their team report, which we'll be focusing on a little later. So looking out for these icons. Again, we're always going to have lots of polls to see where you're at with your teams and some other areas. There's a learning application and team reflection activity. Again, I'm going to be asking you to text in quite a lot today to answers of some on the polls and other general questions. If anyone has a question, because we've got quite a number of people on the webinar today, which is very exciting. If you do have a question beyond the activities, if you say or write the word even question in all caps, then I can see it's asking something perhaps not related to any of the polls, etc. And I'm going to try and answer any questions that come up on the webinar. And if I can't, we're going to make sure that you do get the answers afterwards, and your consultants will connect with you after this session. Let's start then. You and your team trust. If you're on this webinar, you likely recognize that trust is the foundational currency of teams and a critical component to a team functioning optimally. Maybe you're in a team that doesn't have trust, or you have a team within your business that does not trust each other, or perhaps you're just interested in learning more about building trust in teams. On the document you received for the pre-reflection, you were asked to consider a team within your business that lacks trust. To help me understand your context here today, let me know which it is through the next poll. Here are your 4 options and an other. I'll give you just 10 seconds to read this because this is on the pre-read document. I will show you the poll and you can let me know where you are at with your teams. Okay, let's show the poll. So if you want to vote in the poll that you see in front of you. And I'm watching how many of you have voted. 50% of you have voted so far. Excellent, thank you. So we're at about almost 70%, so I'll give you another 10 seconds or so to get your votes in. And if you did write other, can you please let me know in the chat function what the other is? Okay, still a few just coming in, 10 more seconds. Okay, let's close the poll. Let's see, so 9% of you had said, I'm in a team where we do not trust each other. 19% of you said, I have to interact with a team who do not trust each other. 39% of you said, I know of a team within the business who do not trust each other. 8% of you said, most teams in my business do not trust each other. And 25% of you said other. So I'm going to take a look at what the others said. Things like turnover in the department, I suspect trust may be an issue, definitely. For future reference, in case trust does become an issue, somebody wants to learn more about it because they might be starting with a team, and yes, no, we don't know what going into it is going to look like. Um, where trust is limited to only a few members, yes, that can happen a lot. Mergers and acquisitions, you have teams who do not trust other teams. Oh, that's a big one. Change is huge right now. And any time that we have people coming together, we have change management going on, transformations. Senior leadership team does not trust employees and managers and vice versa. That can be very challenging. So thank you, all of you, for texting into me to let me know your others. Again, the context is here so that I can understand where you're coming from. So thank you again. So for the rest of this webinar, focus on that particular team. And if you said that this is for future reference, I'm sure you've probably worked in a team before where trust was an issue. So consider that one and think about that team which has the most challenges because of a lack of trust. Okay, another text-in poll this time. What, in your opinion, has caused the lack of trust for those of you who answered that you are in a team or know of a team that does have lack of trust? Text in your thoughts and I'll read out some of the answers without, of course, naming names. I'll be looking for themes. Let me know if it's a new situation, a person or event that has triggered the trust issue, or if it's been going on for a long time. So I'm going to have a look now to see what you guys are going to text in. What is the cause of the lack of trust? Lack of communication between team members, new additions, the management team, turnover, um, micromanagement, yes, unclear direction, a new leader, competitiveness, lack of communication, new management, power struggles, new additions, lack of respect, ineffective communication, hidden agendas, different agendas, new management, untruthful communication. Can you guys hear the themes that are coming along here? Definitely communication is huge. It's selfish people. Uh, People don't get proper or timely information. Yeah, no information sharing. People not take the time to know each other on a personal level. Yeah, there are lots of reasons here that all bunch around similar challenges. Change in vision, what is a good leader, lack of communication. Communication is definitely a key one here, which is kind of helpful given that DISC is the platform from which we work from. So that's what we're going to be looking at towards the end of this webinar. Backstabbing, gossiping. Oh yes, that's not fun. Terrible. Okay, thank you guys for sharing with me. I appreciate that. It sounds like some of you are experiencing some not fun times with your teams. So let's move on to have a look at the next thing, which is another poll. The effects of no trust on a team. What is the end result on the team that you're thinking about? Again, there's 4 options and an other. Where do you think you are? I'm going to give you 20 seconds to read and then I will show you the poll. Okay, let's take a look at the poll. And again, if you submit other, then please do let me know in the chat function. So we've had just over 50% of you have voted. Some people are saying there's a combination of 2 of the factors going on. Yeah, a couple of people said that they're lucky enough to not have this in their environments, just listening in. All right, okay, 5 more seconds, then we'll close the poll. So we're looking at some of the others. Unions, oh, question of accountability, not responsibility. Yeah, definitely. Okay, guys, let's close the poll and see from the stock answers here. We had 21% of you said, I feel like I have to watch my back and cover my bases. That's not really an engaging environment to be in, and that's one of the things that has come up in the other as well about lack of engagement. 27% of you said there's some backbiting and gossiping on the team. Oh, that is just not nice. You don't come into work for that. It's very hard to bring your best when it's like that. 27% of you said no one takes any responsibility for anything on the team. It's a wonder how anybody gets anything done in that situation, isn't it? 5% of you said we or the team is or are constantly infighting. Yeah, that's also not very pleasant, and it's not something you go home about and celebrate. And the other combination of all of them, it looks like lack of collaboration, direction, transparency, unclear strategy, a lot of change management. So very similar issues across the board. And I think this is in alignment with all the teams that I've worked with over my time. It always comes back pretty much to the same things. Okay, so thank you very much, guys. That's good to know, and again, good framework. Okay, so interesting thing about trust is when we think of what it is, we have a gut response to it. We develop a feeling or a sense of who we can trust, why we trust them, and what we can trust them with. Some people are innately more trusting than others, but what exactly is trust, and how can we frame it up so we know how we can measure it in ourselves and in others? Let's now then take a look at the definition of trust. We're going to look at a couple of areas here. The first area is the dictionary definition of trust, and that is firm belief in the reliability, truth, or ability of someone or something. Some of the synonyms for trust include confidence, belief, faith, freedom from doubt, freedom from suspicion, sureness, certainty, certitude, assurance, conviction, credence, and reliance. So this is what the definition of trust is from the dictionary. We're going to now turn to Stephen M.R. Covey to put this into a business context, because he has 4 cores of trust which will focus on your character and your competence and divide up into these 4 key areas. All of these 4 areas must be present within an individual and then extend to the team if trust is to be developed and maintained. It may be that one core is lacking, and when dealing with an individual that you don't trust, it's a useful model to determine why you don't trust them and then identify the underlying cause. The first is integrity, which is character. Beyond honesty, integrity is doing what you say you will do. That's about being congruent. It's being able to be vulnerable with other team members and more concerned about what is right than being right. Humility. These 2 areas, vulnerability and humility, are huge, and given all the responses that you have given me so far, these are 2 areas that are massively missing in some of your teams. And the last element is doing the right thing even when the choice is difficult. It's having the courage to do the right thing. The second area is also about character. It's intent. Motive is part of intent. Why you do what you do. The best motive that you can do anything is to care about people. And some of you had written part of the challenge with trust is that when people don't actually know each other. Your behavior shows what your intent is, and it's what you do that counts. The third area is about competency, capability. What skills, talents, and abilities do you have and bring to the team? And the fourth area is also competency based. It's all about results. People don't trust people who don't deliver results, and those have to be constantly monitored and proven. Take responsibility for your results, not just the activity that you do. So that's a quick overview of it from Stephen Covey's perspective. We're now going to shift into Patrick Lencioni's 5 Dysfunctions, because that really focuses in the definition of trust for the business context, and we also know how it affects individuals. You, when you are either in or responsible for a team that does not have full trust, you're not engaged in the workplace, we can't bring our best. What are the broader implications for this team? When we look at what Patrick calls the 5 dysfunctions, it is a natural but dangerous pitfall of teams, and they are all interconnected. The model from the bottom up starts with the very first dysfunction of a team. The first dysfunction is absence of trust. This trust stems from team members not willing to be vulnerable to each other. or to be open about their mistakes. Trust is foundational for all the other steps to be in the model. If there's no trust in the team, then it sets the stage for the second dysfunction, which is fear of conflict. Teams who don't trust each other are afraid to enter into passionate debate and discussion about ideas. Instead, they may whisper behind closed doors to each other. When you hear, "That's always how we've done things around here," I know pretty much that this is a team who does not trust each other to push for better ways of doing things. Interestingly, the best teams in the world have conflict, and so do the worst. It's how they deal with the conflict that makes a difference. Innovation usually emerges out of passionate, unfiltered debate, and teams that skirt through the tough issues will not function optimally. Without the ability to openly and respectfully discuss ideas, then there's a third dysfunction, which is lack of commitment. People don't buy into decisions if they haven't aired their opinion. They may nod their heads, or they may nod their heads even in meetings, but do the opposite afterwards. Without the opportunity to have high stake conversations and provide your opinions, compliance is often the result, not commitment. This then leads to the fourth dysfunction, which is avoidance of accountability. If the team doesn't commit and buy into a plan of action, they may not show buy-in, they may not demonstrate accountability, or they may just pay lip service to it. They may not be prepared to ask others on the team to be accountable for their behaviours, and often this is when you'll hear, "It's not my job." These four, of course, align with both congruency and intent from Stephen Covey's model. The top of this pyramid, then, is inattention to results. Rather than the collective goals, the team members have more focus on their own objectives and may only feel accountable for what they do in their own careers. This, of course, aligns perfectly with the whole of Covey's trust model. Let's now look at another poll. Where on the five dysfunctions is the team that you're thinking about stuck? You have five options. Again, I'll give you 20 seconds or so and show you the poll. Okay, let's show the poll. Where are they on the five dysfunctions? We've had just over 40% of people vote so far. %65 of you have voted. Okay, give another 10-15 seconds to let everybody else get their votes in. Okay, let's take a look at what you guys are saying. So 16% of you say that trust is a condition of this, that there's no trust in your team. 28% of you saying conflict, the team don't openly discuss ideas, discuss high-stake challenges, challenge each other's thinking. Yeah, the higher up the ladder you go, the worse it gets, of course. Commitment, there's 21% of you who said that there's no team buy into the goals. 29% of you said accountability feels more like a group of individuals working together. And 6% of you said results. So most teams, it seems that having a challenge on one of the steps, but it all actually does boil from trust. Because if you don't have the trust, then you can't do any of these other areas. So these are the resulting causes of this. Let's take a look then if we flip Lencioni's pyramid onto a positive aspect. Then we see the effects of high trust. And the equation is basically this, that strategy times and execution deliver on results, but trust is a multiplier. It takes a long time to build and moments to shatter. So the trust is foundational to everything that you do, and your teams are experiencing different levels of dysfunction, it has to come back to trust. So let's now have a look to why trust is key in teams. We know that it's behavior based where trust is going to fall down because you can teach skills, but it's attitude, aka behavior, that's the foundation of trust here. So now we know what it looks like in action. In the DISC and Trust Teaming building workshop, there's a very revealing exercise that I have teams do. I ask them a series of statements and that tell them to demonstrate their level of trust with each one. We'll use an imaginary line across the room and create a scale. On one end of the scale is a 1 and the other is a 10, surprisingly, but in between are the rest of the numbers. So I get the team to imagine that. Then I give them some statements like, do you trust your teammates? Do you trust your manager? And they go and stand by the number that they believe is their trust level. And it is an eye-opening exercise. When people go and stand by that number, you see incredulous looks between individuals as they realize that perhaps the trust levels are not what they perceived. Some people trust all of their teammates, other people trust none of them. And of course, everybody has to trust each other. Do you trust your manager? That one's always very interesting when the manager is actually in the room and is often the reason why we don't have high trust anyway. So there's a huge visceral response to seeing where people are in comparison to their teammates on this trust level. It's a skill facilitation exercise, and this is obviously just part of it. And if you'd like to see it in action, in the workshop with your team, your consultant will connect with you after this webinar. It's probably one of the most simple things that I've ever seen that demonstrates, without people having to say a word, what they feel is trust in their team. Because whatever you scored your team, is everybody else going to give it the same number? Chances are not. So this is like starting to peel the onion, delving from the outwards inwards into the information. So moving on to the case study that you got from us. It was the Bees and Honey Advertising Agency. You received their report, and for a quick review for those of you who haven't had a chance to read it, it's a small, well-established advertising agency with a large client base. They've been working together for a couple of years. Mishka is the newest member of the team. She's been with them for 6 months, and the team is experiencing some challenge as they navigate through business and organizational issues. The ease with which they worked together in the past has diminished. There's a big new project they're working on, and in the meeting, 2 of the members are clashing. So here we go. Here are the team members. There's 8 of them in the team, and we have 6 of them in the picture. Nora, top left, top right there, she's a VP client manager and team lead. Next to her is Charlie, the production manager. Tia is the creative director. Bud is the copywriter, Mishka the account manager and the newest member of the team, and Fleur is the production executive. The team is experiencing challenges, and so on this new project that they're working on, in the meeting, 2 of them are having a conversation, Mishka and Fleur. Mishka says to Fleur, "It's not my job to make sure you've done what you're supposed to. You should have known we needed that report." And Fleur responds, "That's not fair. I tried to tell you after the last meeting that I needed more information." As you can see from the picture, the other team members are looking somewhat uncomfortable. Nora, who's team lead here, is trying not to get involved in. So text into me, where do you think that this team is on the 5 dysfunctions? Let me know in the chat box. Where are they on the 5 dysfunctions? Somebody had asked me a question. Do you have issues with getting people to respond honestly in the gauging levels of trust in team numbers exercise? Yes, well, there's more to it than that. There's a whole lot of stuff that goes in ahead of doing that trust exercise. They have to have trust in me to be able to give me their honest answers, is the answer to that one. So it looks like that people are saying accountability, fear of conflict, avoidance of accountability, not holding peers to be accountable is what you guys are saying. So yeah, Mishka is definitely in the lack of accountability. She's more focused on her own objectives than her teammates, and Fleur is definitely avoiding conflict. She doesn't really want to face it. So we can look into any team, see the challenges from the outside in, and determine where that team is. So Bud is going to say something here. Which response, and I'm going to show you a poll, do you think would be the best starting point to get the team heading towards demonstrating some levels of trust and accountability? Okay, so here are your options. There are 5 options there. Leave you 60 seconds or so to read, and I'll show you the poll. Okay, let's take a look at the poll. So about 50% of you have voted. About another 10-15 seconds. 70% of you have voted. Okay, let's take a look at what you guys said. So nobody put answer A. Come on, you two, you're acting like children. I was hoping someone was going to put that one. 80% of you have put B. I hear both of you. Let's see if we can build on it together. 1% of you, I'm sick of both of you arguing. It's not productive. 2% of you said, I don't think either one of you is being collaborative. And 17% said, we need to work together or we're going to fail. Spoken like a true D, even though he actually isn't a D. So let's take a look at our answer here. So our answer on this one is B, which is what many of you said. Now, here's the easy thing. When we are looking in at a situation, our emotions aren't engaged here. We can view this with clarity. We can say it's obvious what this team should be doing. It's obvious what this guy should be saying to the others. But if that was the case, if we could take that insight and use it on the teams that we are in at all times, we wouldn't be in the situation where we have dysfunctions. So it's easy enough for everybody to say with calmness, hey, I know what the right answer is, but it's much more difficult to be able to do it. So whilst that might have seemed a trite exercise, the point here is quite clearly to think about what happens in teams is way deeper than coming up with a right answer. It's about how we come together. It's how we build things with each other. And trusting each other, which goes way beyond this. So thank you for that. Thank you for playing along there. So let's move this on to the next piece, which is application, because we do all know the right answer when observing others, but in real life it doesn't often happen. So this now we're going to look at the application of DISC to trust building situations. I wish I had known all of this before I was leading teams. It would have helped me so much. How do we restore trust and credibility? Having tough conversations, delegation when you don't trust another's competence, and we're also going to provide at the end 8 bonus behaviors that you can start with your teams to develop and build trust. The framework, of course, for this is DISC. It's key for helping teams understand how to build trust because it tells us a person's preference in behavioral style in the workplace. We find it easier to trust people who are just like us because they're familiar and we're trustworthy, right? I mean, who here is going to say, hey, I'm not trustworthy? But I don't think there's anybody I've ever met in business who has been fundamentally 100% trusted at all times by all people. For those of you with PPA certification, you'll know this already, and for those of you without it yet, your Thomas consultant can explain more about the power of DISC when you meet to discuss. We're going to continue on with the use of the case study. So we're going to look at the 3 areas of trust building situations with the Bees and Honey agency. The team report, the team audit report that you received, is created by combining all of the Graph 3 working strengths from all of the members. So if you look at the case study, you'll see that there is Nora, Mishka, Derek, Charlie, Fleur, and Tony, Tia, and Bud. Their working strengths are the things that they have above the midline, so they are used to combine together to create the team profile. This gives you incredible insight into how your team is likely operating, as well as giving you strengths and areas to coach team members for development and optimal results. This is a very quick dip into this. There is so much meat in the sandwich, as it were, but we can only just take a little nibble. Your Thomas consultant will talk to you more in depth about the value of this team assessment. It's the one that keeps on giving forever. Let's take a look then at DISC preferences so that we can use these to help disseminate why we're having challenges. Here we can see for each profile what their preference in behavior is in the workplace. So for Ds, they like to get to business quickly, they like the facts, they like to make decisions, they like to challenge self and others. Influence likes to demonstrate emotions, tell stories, develop relationships, and motivate others. Steadiness likes to think before speaking. They're great listeners, they're organized and methodical, and they like to complete projects. And compliance likes to follow the rules, problem solving, they're diplomatic, they like to be accurate and careful. If you're looking then at Mishka and Fleur, which are those 2 profiles there. Those of you who know PPA will understand that Mishka is a CSD profile and Fleur is an ICS profile. Those of you who aren't familiar yet, if you just look at the leading profile factor, so the C for Mishka and the I for Fleur, you can look at the 2 descriptors here. Where do you think that these guys might connect? What will they have in common? Text into me. Where will Mishka and Fleur connect? Where will they have things in common? Yep, most of you are getting that they do actually have influence, steadiness. They don't have influence, I'm telling a porky. They both have compliance and steadiness on their profiles. Yeah, so they've both got that steady procedural and liking the rules. Excellent, thank you very much. So where will they disconnect? Text into me, what is the difference? Why are they likely to be having challenges with each other? So if we've got Mishka, who's a leading compliance profile with influence below the line, it's likely to suggest that she likes the rules, likes to follow procedure, isn't particularly chatty, doesn't necessarily want to talk with people. Whereas Fleur, although she has compliance on her profile, is a leading, very high influence, so likes to talk and connect with people. What are those 2 styles likely to disconnect on? Mishka also does have dominance above the line and Fleur has it below the line. So we do have a disconnect there. So they are opposite on the D and the I. Yes, definitely Fleur is likely going to be more sociable. So D's with the C as well, likely to want to get the results. So that's what Mishka is want to do. So yeah, some of you coming up with some good suggestions here. Mishka is more likely to be a bit straightforward, whereas Fleur even shows a preference perhaps for a lot more talking. So these 2 in a meeting together, Fleur is likely to be a bit more interactive with how she talks with her hands, using more words, whereas Mishka is probably more likely to want Fleur just to get straight to the point. Fleur might get a bit put off by Mishka's lack of emotion potentially, so she might overcompensate. Yeah, so when somebody's got steadiness below the line, which is what Actually, neither of them do. So we don't have one who's going to be working necessarily faster than another. Fleur may want to make a relationship, and Mishka just wants to get things done. No chatting, absolutely. So you guys can kind of see already that how these two come together might be a bit of a challenge if they don't understand each other. So let's take a look then at reasons why each profile might have caused a breakdown in trust and what they need to do in order to restore it. And we will go further into Mishka and Fleur. Each profile factor has potential limitations that could cause a break in trust and in credibility. So for dominance, they may overstep prerogatives. They may override people. They may avoid participating in a team. Influence. They may have difficulty planning time. They may be unrealistic in appraising people. They may make decisions based only on surface analysis. High steadiness may take too long to adjust to change. They may hold a grudge. They may be contented with the status quo. And the compliance may be over-reliant on rules. They may get bogged down in detail, and they may yield their position to avoid the controversy. So again, where do you think is the potential for a breakdown in credibility between Mishka and Fleur? We know that likely Fleur wants to make a relationship, but Mishka wants just to get down into business. So when it comes down to credibility, where could this breakdown be happening between the two? Yes, you guys are getting it absolutely. So people are putting things like control over the project. So what does that mean specifically? Overriding the other. Yes, I'm assuming that we're saying that Mishka is likely to override Fleur. What else? What else can you see might be causing a credibility breakdown between these two people, which will bring up the lack of trust between the two? Yeah, Fleur not getting things done, Mishka getting annoyed. Yep, decision making, distraction on the task. Mishka may not want to wait on Fleur. Fleur wants more information. Mishka doesn't need so much. Yeah, absolutely. Perfect, you guys, because when you think about how the credibility will happen, what are they likely to think of each other? They're going to have a different approach to planning. Mishka may see a lack of decisive behaviour as incompetent. Absolutely. Yeah, speed of execution, approach on how to make a decision. Yeah, so these are all the elements that are going to cause huge lack of trust on the team. Because if we have a look at that team makeup, you can see that there is a lot of different profiles in there, a lot of different ways of doing business. And because we're focusing in on these two, when you think about if there's no trust between two people, then you multiply it between all members of the team. Between 8 members, you're going to see some team members trust each other better than others because they are more like them than others. So you could see that Fleur may connect with Derek, for example, because he also has a high I, and Anthony. So they may have the high I group within the team. The high I person might be seen by the D person as weak. Yeah. So approach on how to got the names. Yeah, no worries about getting the names incorrect. Communication disconnect. This is the biggest challenge in causing a lack of trust and also a lack of credibility within the business. So to restore trust and credibility, there are steps that every profile can take. First one is don't make excuses for behavior. You'll find this, and again, these are all the things to get to. It takes a while to get to them. We don't want to make excuses for our behavior, but we so often do. Well, I did that because of this. I did that because someone else did it. We need to be able to take responsibility within the team for what we've done. It goes back to that accountability. To get a team to this stage, they do, by and large, need an intervention because most teams will make excuses for behavior and blame each other. Acknowledge the effect on the team. One of the most interesting things I found working with teams is that people don't actually realize the effect they have on each other, regardless of the level that they are, whether they are a newcomer to the team or the senior person. The senior person often does have the most effect on other people, but they often seem to be most unaware of that. And the higher up the ladder they have gotten, the less feedback they've got on their effect on others. But the junior people, the people who are just starting, the youngsters in the team, the new people in the team, they have huge effect on others too. You take somebody out, put somebody else in, it makes a huge difference. So acknowledging the effect of your behavior on the team is a very good step to get to as well. It's all about being vulnerable, as we saw in Lencioni's trust. Make a commitment to rebuild team trust, because a team working together for the same goals and objectives needs to work with each other. This is not a separate group of individuals. These are people who rely on each other. Ask for ongoing feedback. This is another thing that we do in workshops and should be, it's not just once a year performance review, but this is regular ongoing feedback, both good and bad. People want it, but people don't seem to like giving it. Even good feedback, which is interesting. There's good feedback and there's improvement feedback. And being humble, that can be very challenging. Again, we all want to prove that we're worth the money that we're getting. So sometimes being humble can be a challenge because we want to say how good we are, the ideas that we've had. But humility is a key cornerstone for being a good leader and a good member of a team. So that applies for every profile, and again is part of the process that we can go through. Let's now turn our attention to these tough conversations. Yay, I'm going to have a tough conversation today, said no one ever. Some profiles would rather have a root canal, but in a trusting team, tough conversations are often needed as members bring each other to commitment and accountability. As you heard earlier, teams that have healthy conflict engage in it in a way that allows a team to grow and get better. We may have people who engage in unhealthy conflict, but what we're talking about here is a tough conversation which negates the conflict perspective. Knowing what profile you're talking to can help you determine how to have that tough conversation. So let's take a look at each of the profiles again. So with dominance, they want you to be directed to the point. And the interesting thing about this, I do on the certification training, and I know that actually a lot of you on this webinar have been with me for certification, so you can bear testament to this, is there's an exercise that I do at the end of day 2, which highlights this perfectly, is that dominant people, they want you to be directed to the point, but it can be really challenging for other styles, especially those people with steadiness on their profile. They don't want to offend, they want to be helpful, but dominants say no, just be direct and straight to the point with me. Focus on how he or she may fail if he or she continues on the current course of action. You can hit these guys straight between the eyes with their basic fear just by being direct and saying you'll fail if you continue on this route. Especially dominants as part of a team, they need to understand what everybody else is doing and what they can bring, and that dominance needs to work with them. And ask what he or she intends to do about it. So that's overall guideline for how to have a tough conversation with dominance. With influence, influence always praise what he or she has achieved because they do like that recognition. Stay clear of negative wording and making him or her feel rejected. Often you'll see the high influence. They love to hear what they've done well, something they have created is providing value within the organization. But if you use a negative word like but, then it's like deflating the balloon by sticking a pin in it. So never a good thing. All of these areas, by the way, you should be preparing to have the conversation with somebody, so you need to modify your approach. Get him or her involved in a discussion of what he or she can do to improve what they are doing, and don't let them lose face. With high steadiness, take your time and acknowledge how he or she feels. Be very careful not to trigger his or her insecurity. Always happens in the training sessions for the certification is that it's typically the Ds who do that. They give them information, they try to sell to them, and they don't take the time to acknowledge how the high steadiness is feeling and give them time to review the information. Listen to him or her and suggest a time to come back to it. They don't necessarily want to respond immediately. So the conversations that you're going to have will vary depending on who you're talking to. And with our compliance, Use facts and evidence. Interestingly, when I see high influence people trying to talk to high compliance people, often they use too many words, which is always lots of fun. So use facts and evidence, be thoroughly prepared and provide him or her with the data, and let him or her be involved in weighing up the pros and cons and avoid turning it into a conflict. So very different ways of having a tough conversation with each style. What recommendation then would you give to Mishka about talking with Fleur? What could we tell Mishka? What would she have to do in talking with Fleur? So remember, Mishka is a CSD profile, Fleur is an ICS. What would we have to tell Mishka not to do? Yeah, negative. Be clear of negative wording. Absolutely. Don't use praise her contributions. Let her speak. Give her time. Praise and get her involved. Ask questions versus tell. Yeah, praising efforts, pointing out the need for knowledge, explain what she can do better, and no negative words. Yeah, absolutely awesome. I mean, all of this stuff sounds very simple, but in reality, it is a lot more challenging. So thank you very much, guys, for getting involved in that one. I'm going to move ahead now to thinking about delegation. So, avoiding delegating risks is rarely about character. This is about perceived lack of competence. If you suspect someone on the team does not have the competence to do a task, consider your own as well as the other person's leading profile again. The way forward, though, is the same for all profiles. It may start as a tough conversation, as we just went through, and then it may move into these steps. So, step one, outline the project or requirement. What does good look like? They need to know when you're delegating, what are your expectations? Two, ask open-ended questions, not questions to which the answer can be yes or no. For example, don't say, do you need anything else? Because most people are going to say no. If you say, do you know what you're doing? Most people are going to say yes, because they fear not knowing. Instead, say to them, talk me through how you're going to do this so that you can find out if they understand how to do it. Number three, of course, is actively listen and probe further as the person describes how they are going to approach the task, because the teachable moments don't come in you telling somebody and them nodding. The teachable moments come from them telling you how they're going to do it, and you can course correct. Number four is to identify gaps. Is it the lack of caring or lack of knowledge? What is causing the gaps between what you're looking for, how this person is going to do it? What do they need? Do they need some more training? Do they need more skills? Do they need a behavioral readjustment? And number five, have the person check in regularly. Make it his or her responsibility to do that. Have more frequent check ins to begin with until you both feel comfortable that the person is on the right track. So, again, consider your profile is always important, but going into delegation, the steps are pretty much the same. Okay, so there's delegation. 8 behaviors to build trust and accountability. So again, these are going to seem fairly straightforward. Easy to say, more difficult to do, but it all starts from the very basis of trust. The springboard off of what you've heard so far with the Covey model as well as the Lencioni model. So let's start out. Buy into the team goal. Be involved with discussions and take part in the team. Interesting how many team sessions we do and the people on the team don't actually know what the team goal is. So make sure everybody on the team knows what the team goal is. If you have any concerns about it, bring them up. Number two, be realistic. If you think that something can get in the way of the team achieving the goal, then step up and say so. Ensure expectations are clear about who does what and what is expected. Number three, make the right decision, which is always easier with a retrospect. But if you have the knowledge first for the team, it might have to be a tough decision, but courage to do what is right as a team directive will develop trust, and talking to the right people, knowing what your goal is, will help you make the right decisions. Number 4, behave predictably and consistently, but make sure that it's predictable and consistent in a good way. I once had two bosses. One was as nice as anything one day and a demon the next. The other was a demon all the time. At least he was consistent and predictable, but don't use that as an excuse if you have learned you may have some damaging behaviors. I mean, you high D's out there, or am I talking to myself? That was me. Anyway, so behave predictably and consistently, but be good. Number 5, communicate clearly. This is a big one. As a lot of you guys had already said, communication is a challenge in your team. Communication covers so much ground. In the workshop, we have a whole piece on it. And in a nutshell, ensure what is being said is the same as what's being heard. And listen, truly listen to each other. Number 6, do what you'll say you'll do always. And if there's a good reason you can't do it, make sure you communicate that as soon as possible and provide a solution to how the thing you can't do now can be done, perhaps at a different time or by someone else. Number 7, be forthright and candid, be truthful. Easier for some profiles than others, but it doesn't mean trampling all over other people's feelings just so that you can be honest. It also doesn't mean hinting at what you want to say. Most people are not good at picking up subtle hints. Hold each other accountable for their part towards the team's objectives. Have that courageous conversation. It's something else that we look at in the workshop. And number 8, care about your team members. It's amazing again how much of a difference this one makes. I've worked with teams before who've known each other through work for years, yet one simple icebreaker at the start of the workshop and they get to know each other in a much deeper way, which allows more trust to develop, allows team members to show vulnerability and ask for help when they need it without fear of judgment whatsoever. So when we look at those 8 behaviors to build trust and accountability, are there any one of those in there that you think your team could do with right now? So people are texting in. Number 1, buying into team goal, be realistic, communicate clearly. Yeah, that's a number 1. Number 6 is do what you say you'll do always, care about team members, communication, buying into team goal. 1, 2, and 6 are major factors here. For everyone has a different perspective on what is important. And again, it comes back to making sure that your view of your team is aligned with everybody else's. You have your perspective on where your team is at. You have your own view on how you trust each other. But what is everybody else's? It's about being vulnerable and open and communicating clearly. When you say something, is it understood the way that it is intended? That's another great exercise that we do in the workshop. Different profiles hear different things. So one exercise I do has some similar profiles understand each other much clearer. So learning the communication style of other people helps. Number 8 is a main issue for our senior team. They're trying to fight for supremacy. Yeah, I've seen that in pretty much every single team. And to be honest, I have worked with a number of teams in my tenure in this business. I've only ever met one team, and I'm not kidding, one team who got there without intervention. And how they got there is an incredible story. Their leader is a man who I have worked with several times, and he molds to what his team needs at the time. I've seen him be incredibly dominant. I've seen him be incredibly communicative. He also is very humble, very, very smart man, but knows that it's the team that's going to make him. And he got there without any intervention. So the key for any business, I think, is pretty much all of these and understand where you're at on each of the steps. Are you accountable yourself? Are you predictable? Are you consistent? Do you communicate clearly, or do you think to yourself, "Oh, that's ridiculous. Anybody should have known what I meant there." That's not always true. And is it okay for your people to ask you questions? That's another one. Sometimes you hear people say, "Well, this is a stupid question." Well, actually, there's no such thing as a stupid question. There's only information that the person hasn't got yet. So even if you think you've communicated it 1,000 times, they still haven't received it in a way that they need to understand it. So ask them what their understanding is. Okay, so thank you very much, guys. Let's think about pulling this all together now. The starting point for a high performing team definitely is trust, as I hope that we've demonstrated through this last hour. It can take a long time to build, it's easily broken, but without it, your team won't be high performing. Anytime somebody new comes into it, somebody leaves the team, you've got a different dynamic. So, this is not something that you establish once. It's something that you have to keep revisiting. Think about the things that you said earlier that can cause the challenge with trust. Those are the things that you have to keep an eye open for. When people come and work in a team, they come trusting. Trust doesn't disappear overnight just on its own. It happens because something is going on in the team, in the business, but we all start new jobs full of trust for the most part. There are very few high-performing teams who got there without some form of intervention and ongoing strategy to keep them all uplifted, if you like, upskilled. We call them soft skills, but there's nothing soft about them. They are hard to learn and maintain. But I think if it's competency that's the challenge, it's easier to teach people the skills, but it's attitude that is key here. What is the person's attitude towards being on the team? So your consultant is going to connect and call you after this to see which would be a best fit for your team, whether it's a team trust workshop or a courageous conversations workshop. Okay, so there's a very long question there, which I'm not sure I'm going to be able to read and answer in the time I have left. So I'm going to just go to the next slide and say this webinar recording is going to be uploaded to the client resource site within 72 hours. The upcoming webinar, the next date is June the 19th. How do I provide feedback on all 3 Thomas assessments? That's PPA, GIA and TQ. There's where you can register. If you are not already a member of our LinkedIn trained user group, then please do join it. If you're not sure how, shoot your consultant an email. Let us know on the end here. And last but not least, any questions for me? Anybody got any last questions before we go 4 minutes? Oh, thank you. Some people saying thank you. I love this stuff. I don't know if you could tell. Will you be sending the HRCI code? Yes. I'm glad you appreciated the webinar. I'm not going to read out what you wrote there, Ray, but thank you. Can we get a copy of the presentation? We provide the webinar in 48 hours, so you can watch it and listen to it. You can mute my voice if you like, so you don't have to hear my dulcet tones or my English accent. Oh, thank you, the person who just said it was their first session and looking forward to more sessions. Great. Well, make sure you get signed up for the next one, which will be an interactive one. Thank you. Good use of applying DIS to team development. Thank you, guys. I think we've got 3 minutes left unless there's anything else. I think that is a wrap. Thank you very much, Dragon. I think he did an awesome job, didn't he, everybody? Yes, he did. Oh, thank you. Yeah. All right. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it. See you in June.